my favorite musical experience, the best phone call I've ever gotten in my life. I'm a huge James Brown fan. After James Brown died, his musical director, Pee Wee Ellis, he started this African tribute to James Brown called Still Black, Still Proud. And I got a call from Pee Wee's wife. She was like, "Hey, do you want to play?" And I was just like, "Did you call the right guy? Like, you're calling like Chad from Miami to fill in for Fred Wesley, right?"
This is where it all begins. So say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen. My name is Michael T. Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host, Tyler Kelly. Today, we're at Venture Cafe Miami, and if you're not familiar with Venture Cafe, it is the largest gathering of innovators, entrepreneurs, creators anywhere in the world. So if you're near a Venture Cafe City on a Thursday night, you're going to want to check out the Thursday night gathering. I'm sure you'll meet some cool people or someone that can help you with whatever you're doing. You're going to love it. Now today, I'm very excited to have Chad Bernstein with us on the show. Chad, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Chad is the co-founder and CEO of Guitars Over Guns organization. Through the universal language of music, he has unlocked a bridge to reach Miami and Chicago's most disenfranchised youth. Also received a doctorate of musical arts degree from the University of Miami. He's one of South Florida's premier Latin, jazz, and funk artists, playing trombone and a host of other instruments, obviously. You've taught music, and you've done music with some amazing artists, right? Mm-hmm. Which we can talk about later. And you've been honored for your work with Guitars Over Guns on CNN as one of the CNN heroes, and just the list goes on and on and on. But the conversation is just starting. So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So it's not every show that we get to talk to somebody that's like deep into music. And, you're a musical person.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we've ever mentioned this on the show, but you're a classically trained guitarist.
Yeah, a classically trained guitarist who never practice anymore, which means I don't play anymore. But there's always a connection with another musician.
For sure. So
excited to have you on the show and learn all about what you do. And so tell me where all of this started for you.
As far as music goes, as early as I can remember, just being totally like enamored with the sound of music, even as a kid, like reaching up and tickling the keys on the piano and just letting the sound kind of rain down on me, to having really early experiences through the elementary school that I was in, listening to what I'm sure was a horrible sounding, 5th or 6th grade band, and just being like washed over with energy, like musical energy, and just feeling like, what is this feeling where my entire body is consumed with this thing and it's just like vibrating inside of me. And I remember even back then having this vivid, like, I have to sign up for this when this becomes available, which at the time was in 4th grade. And I had already been playing, my parents kind of recognized the musical talent in me. And so I had started playing piano, and it was just something that, it was like a switch that somebody flipped, and it was something that I could just sink myself into and totally understand. It's just the way my brain operates as if it always had. So, I was very fortunate to find that as a kid and to be exposed to that. And I think that's a lot of what's driven me towards just looking at what is a kind of grave injustice of what we're doing in the equity of music access and the opportunities for kids to play it. Because even, growing up in like a nice neighborhood, when I went back to visit, I saw the middle schools in the area, the band programs were leaving and all this stuff, and it really upset me as a musician. And at the time I was in college, I was playing with a band called Swenelo here in Miami, and we had a friend that asked us to come and work with a group of kids at a juvenile detention center that she was at, and she just couldn't really reach these kids and didn't want to bring in another accountant or somebody for like a career day type thing. So she's like, "You guys are musicians, you're a band, why don't you come in and play it for them?" And so we came and we brought the instruments, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, you can't bring the guitar in here. The strings could be taken off and used to strangle you." And we're just like, "Oh my God." Wow. But we ended up being able to go in and ultimately we were able to play for the kids, which was a saving grace because they had zero interest in what we had to say. And it was just like, totally blank stares until we started playing. And then we got the head nodding, and then our MC started rapping, and then the kids were like, into it. And we stopped, and this kid from the back of the room just goes, na na nueve. And, the reaction of the guards was immediate one of like disciplinary action. We're sitting there saying, no, like, it's okay, sing it again. And he did, and we started singing it back and did this call and response thing, and all of a sudden, like, the drummer comes up with a little beat, and then we're grooving, and then the horn players come up with something, and then our rapper starts, rapping, and then a couple kids get up and start a cipher, and the music's just like coming from everywhere and being created everywhere, and this whole room just like ignites in energy, and it was amazing, and everyone just surrendered to that moment and lost themselves in it. And it was like nobody's thinking about where they're going afterwards, what they're going back to. And after we finished that song, it was like the tables turned. It was no longer us like teaching at them or talking at them, but them saying, how did you do that? Like, tell me, how did you know how to play that? How did you know that, how did you know to play something that went with that guy? Like, that he just sang that from the back of the room. And that started a conversation that ended up opening the doors to anything, talking about what artists they listen to and why, and where they're from, and why they're here, and how they felt about that. And it was obvious that these kids that were kind of operating behind what seemed like walls, that society had kind of given up going over, through music, we just kind of opened doors that were kind of hidden within them, and sparked an interest in working to use this huge disparity in where music's being delivered to kids as an opportunity, as a vehicle to say, like, well, why don't we do this before these kids are making decisions that land them here? And the rest is kind of history.
So I had read somewhere, I don't know if it was in something about what you're doing, but you talked about this idea of like the zip codes in Miami, and where certain people have access to music, you can also trace access to a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
Can you like kind of dig in and explain that to us?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that has been a result of this work is that, we're treating the point of music access and opportunity in that sense. And we're working with kids. And when you start to form real meaningful relationships with kids, you start to uncover some of the obstacles that are standing between them and success. Those obstacles and the access to music are all rooted in, inequities and injustices in our society, and larger systemic issues and root causes of these problems, are significant, and they are steeped in poverty, and, you can just continue to trace it back. And so a large part of where we're trying to head with this work is, how do we not operate in a silo and in a vacuum of music, but like address some of the larger systemic barriers that are creating these points of inaccess. Through music, we're finding a way in. And because we do popular music and hip hop and pop and music, we're trying to meet the kids where they're at, both physically and emotionally, and in all ways. So we go to the schools, we enact the program after school, which first of all just keeps kids in a safe place, which is a victory to begin with, and provide them with a meal. That alone is like, you wouldn't believe how significant that is. Some of our kids are not eating properly, if not at school, or at all. And you cannot ask a kid to focus and be disciplined and all these other things that we're expecting of kids unless base level needs are met.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about, we're going in there with the hat of like, I'm going to teach you music, and through music, I'm going to build a mentor relationship. And you find out that kids aren't sleeping properly because things are going on at home, or they're sharing a room with 3 siblings, or living with another family, or not eating right, or, there's stress and trauma as a result of the living conditions that they're operating within. Those are things that you can't just turn your back and say, yeah, but music. Those are the things that are like, all right, well, now that you start to see a little bit more of the picture and your spectrum of perception widens, you can't just stay in your lane anymore. And so it's not about, all right, well, I think our job is to solve all those problems, but how do we start thinking collaboratively and collectively about having real community impact, and what does real community impact look like? And for us, that means engaging people that can start to address some of these factors and build a critical mass, not only of people that are addressing the problem, but of young people that are breaking the cycle, that are taking the problem on their own shoulders and saying, you know, I now have a window into this, that not only do I have a window into this because I've lived it, but now I have a window into how to get out of this, and I care about this, and I acknowledge my own power as an individual in this movement to create change. So
you've been doing this for
10 years.
10 years. So in that time, you've seen, I'm imagining, kids grow into adults.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing
so tell me
adults.
some of those stories of the impact that you've seen. Now,
So funny enough, we have a board meeting next week, and have a student for the first time that is applying for a board of directors position, and not with the asterisk next to his name of, you know, here's a board member, but he's a child or he's a student, so let's not hold him to the same standards. No, being held to all the same standards, who's actively, through his advocacy of the organization and some of the outreach efforts and some of the things that he joins me on for fundraising, has developed a love for speaking, has developed a total realization of his kind of impact. And he's an amazing musician, he's an amazing young man. He's an incredibly talented individual and an incredible leader. And he's, you know, taken to music, and not, you know, our goal is not necessarily to have every student that goes through the program pursue music as a career or as a profession, but to develop the skills to kind of be in the driver's seat of their own future. And in this case, he's taken to music in a very serious way. Got a scholarship offered to Berklee School of Music. I mean, he's very high level music, but his leadership skills and his potential just as a community force is incredible. He was a part of our interview process for our new regional director. He's just kind of remained a part of the program, and he's now working for Guitars Over Guns and mentoring other kids and leading our alumni program. So he's got an incredible perspective on the organization and the impact that it can have, and his application like fried all of our board members. They were just like, this is unbelievable, and it's real. I mean, you get to see the impact this young man lived this, and he's actually joining me next week or the week following to go to the My Brother's Keeper Summit in Oakland, California, as a part of the Obama Foundation's initiatives, of which, you know, we'll have an opportunity to meet and hear from the president and President Obama, and you know, have the opportunity to learn and glean best practices from other people that are doing this work to empower, you know, young men and women of color. So it's amazing.
So you told that story at the beginning, like that very emotional story, like where everyone had that connection.
Yeah.
Was that an experience you had before Guitars Over Guns?
Yeah.
Or was that kind of the origin, that experience?
That is the origin story. So after we had that experience at the Juvenile Detention Center, you know, I spoke to my dad about it when we were having a conversation around, you know, how to marry your passion and create a vocation and live a life of purpose, and what that really meant, and how, as a musician, which all musicians are entrepreneurs kind of by nature, you're a brand, you know, as a musician. So how are you taking all that and creating a living from it? And when we started to think through like what the actual intentions were with that juvenile detention experience, and what the potential of activating a core of musicians that were socially conscious and community minded, why not have that energy put towards community impact? Whereas, so, you know, the model for so many musicians is like, all right, I'm going to do my music, and then I'm going to do anything else on the side to make money. You know, and there's nothing wrong with any of those jobs that we've all had, but let's use those unique skill sets towards really improving, you know, the potential of our impact in the community. And so that's kind of where the concept came from. And then we spent a couple years vetting it and talking to partners and aligning ourselves strategically with people, and got rolled out in a school with 15 kids in North Miami in a partnership with communities and schools. And then, it's grown to over 800 kids a year today, and 26 programs in Chicago and Miami, and has served over 3,000 kids. I mean, it's kind of amazing it's amazing both to look back and realize how far we've kind of gone, and then to look forward and see how tall the rest of the mountain is, but it's it's just inspiring work to get up and be able to do every day.
Yeah. What's the vision for the future? Like, what's the next big thing you want to tackle?
Yeah, one of the big things that we're trying to tackle now through this Music Access Fellowship, which is a really unbelievable initiative that's happening here, which is guided by Radical Partners. I know you guys had Rebecca Fishman-Lipsey on the show recently, and a local philanthropist, Dan Lewis. But the concept is, we have all these organizations in Miami, and Miami could be a microcosm for really anywhere. But we have all these organizations that are attacking the problem in small bites, and nobody's looking at the whole picture and saying, well, if we transition the mindset from competition to kind of that abundance mindset of like, how do we all communicate? Not any one of our organizations could serve every kid in this community, and every kid needs something, related to music access. How do we leverage all of our strengths to meet that goal? That's really opened my eyes to thinking about our desire for national growth and ultimately international growth in a very different way. The beautiful thing about music is that it's universal, and it's this language that's spoken throughout the world in various forms, but there's not a single human being that you'll meet that doesn't like music of some sort. And so it allows us the opportunity to communicate anywhere. And when we think at like 8 to 10 major music cities in the country, and the needs and challenges that we're seeing across the board in terms of the drivers of, students dropping out of school and being disengaged or disinterested, the lack or the effect of poverty and, on social emotional development, and the opportunity that we have as a program to create impact there, it's hard to want to keep it in one place. And so now we're vetting models for expansion and national expansion. Expanded to Chicago 5 years ago, have learned a tremendous amount from that. And what does it look like to build an organization, and what is our role within the ecosystem of collective impact in those cities and nationally to get to where we want to be. So
let's switch over and talk about kind of like your CEO role, or kind of
Sure.
the entrepreneurial part of what you're doing. And anybody that's like, that has, I wouldn't say this is a cause and a passion for you. You talked about kind of that intersection of passion and what you're good at. But anybody who's doing something similar, they're trying to get it to grow. You're talking about trying to get it to scale. What have you learned in the process of all this that you think you could share with somebody who's in the same position as you, but a couple of years ago when they're just starting?
Sure. Man, how long is this show? I've learned a ton. I think you can't be afraid of what you don't know, but you also don't have to make the same mistakes that other people have already made. And so the value of mentorship, and it's ironic to think that would be a revelation for a guy that runs a mentorship organization. But in terms of building capacity as a leader and a CEO, who's doing things that I want to model our business out of? And that could be, how do we build culture, within the organization? You have everyone that's coming to a place because they're passionate about something and they're willing to sacrifice something or work in a field that isn't necessarily recognized and celebrated financially like other sectors. And people are willing to make investments into that. How do you protect that? How do you protect people in those roles? How do you create career opportunity and growth and sustainability for individuals in your business? And that is something that is really important. So I may not look to another nonprofit organization to think through what building culture looks like, or what HR pathways look like, or what policies and procedures need to be in place to mitigate risk working with youth. There's a ton that I think when you don't limit yourselves to a single sector, that you can really learn and glean, and then you get to pick. I mean, the world today, as an internet-based world, like the world is like truly your grocery store, and you just get to pull whatever you want and glean from whoever you want, and people are accessible. And if you really truly get into what somebody's doing and respect it and appreciate it, more times than not, you can find a way to reach them. You can find a way to have a conversation with them. I know that all of us in our organization feel that way when somebody has a question or wants to advance themselves and sees something we're doing that they could learn from. I mean, I don't know. I feel like we have a collective responsibility to build community in that way. And I would say that the only real mistake in there is being afraid to ask the question. Nobody's expectation is that you know everything. And I think as a young CEO that didn't come from a business school background, but really wanted to hold my own in a room full of people that had that level of expectation, I had to put myself in a room where people had those expectations, and I had to do what I needed to do to feel confident in those situations. And there's a lot of kind of self-driven learning that happened to get there, but a lot of that came from other people. So I think the value of mentorship is a really huge one for me. Finding people that are in your space that resonate with the challenges that you're having. And then as far as, kind of best practices, I mean, they're out there. And I think just being really open to realizing that you're never going to have it all figured out, and you can always do things better. If you have that mindset towards constant assessment, evolution, that's what makes the business continue to thrive. And when you grow, for every couple of individuals that you add to your staff or school sites or whatever your kind of growth metric is, the complexity of your business is going to grow by more than that. So you have to continue to reevaluate your systems and your ability to support and sustain what you're doing. So you can't really get stuck. The only constant in growing an entrepreneurial venture is change. Change is the only constant in a growing business. So just means looking at things differently. If you're going to double your budget every year, you can't look at a year like a year. You got to break quarters and look at them like they're that metric of growth. So I think just looking far enough ahead to know what you're measuring yourself up to. If you're a $100,000 organization and you're aspiring to be a $5 million organization, when you look at the requirements for $1 million grant, what is being asked of that size organization? What do you need to do in terms of preparing your audit? What does your board need to look like? What are the things that you have to have in place that may not be relevant to you now, but at least it'll give you an idea of what will be relevant and where you want to head. That's something that was a really unintentional kind of thing that happened to us, where I saw a grant and I was like, oh man, I want to be able to get this grant. And it was really competitive, the application and all the due diligence was insane. And it was 3 years prior to where we could even be eligible based on a particular audit that was needed. So I spent the next 3 years preparing the organization just to be eligible. And in that time, a ton of things happened and we grew in a bunch of different ways, but I had a mind's eye of this is where we need to be in that moment. And that moment came and we knocked it out of the park. I mean, we got a really big investment from an organization that's doing incredible things in Miami. And we were ready for it. So I just think that unless you have a vision of where you're trying to go, and it doesn't necessarily need to be your fleshed out, here's where we're going to be here, but in order to do this thing, I need to have these things lined up. And then, the vision can change. If this is still a goal of yours, you're at least ready for it.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about music.
Sure.
Because you've worked with Pharrell, will.i.am, Shakira, Pitbull, the list just goes on and on. So tell me about some of your favorite experiences just in music as a musician.
I've been really fortunate in a lot of ways, without question, but my music career has been a lot of fun. And as cool as some of the big names that I've been able to work with have been, and it's amazing just to kind of like peek behind the curtains of what happens when, I mean, I remember when we were playing with Pitbull when he was first like kind of getting big, and I mean already decently big. I mean, we were doing the Tonight Show, and when Conan O'Brien was still the Tonight Show host. But to see his work ethic was incredible. You know, you fly to LA and it's like a 6 a.m. lobby call to go to the studio to do, you know, to stage everything and get sound check and levels, and then you sit and you wait for a couple hours, then you go back to the hotel, and then, or they need you for something else, then you go back to the hotel, and then you kind of have an hour or two break, and then you go back and you film. And so we were kind of exhausted by the process. You know, it's like long flight, and you're over there and you're up early, and then it's a lot of sit around and hurry up and wait. And at every opportunity where there wasn't something that he was like engaged in, he was doing a phone interview, he was doing radio call signs, it was unbelievable. The schedule they sent for like who needs to be where at what time, it gave me a really good window into like what it means to have success and to brand yourself on that level. And I think regardless of the industry and regardless of, you know, your politics or your musical taste, it's just amazing to watch people work really hard towards something that they really want. So that's what I got most out of that experience of playing with like a big, you know, big star that was rising and obviously has continued to. My favorite musical experience, best phone call I've ever gotten in my life. I'm a huge James Brown fan, so like funk and like Fred Wesley, the trombone player in James Brown's band, the one that you hear when he's like, "Hit me, Fred," you know, the guy. After James Brown died, which was Christmas Day on I think 2012 or 13. His musical director, Pee Wee Ellis, who's the guy that wrote Cold Sweat, which was like the first funk song. He started this African tribute to James Brown called Still Black, Still Proud. And the whole premise was they were going to play James Brown's music with a core band that had African artists as special guests to sing and play, like to be featured on a James Brown song. So, you know, it could be like Vusi Malesela from South Africa. It's like the voice of South Africa singing "It's a Man's World," you know? And then we would play one of Vusi's songs. Well, this whole thing started with Maceo, Pee Wee, and Fred, which was the JBs, like the best horn section ever to play. And there was a year that Fred had a conflict or wasn't going to do the tour, and I got a call from Pee Wee's wife. She was like, "Hey," and Pee Wee had come down and recorded some music with the Spam All-Stars a couple years prior. And she's like, "Hey, Fred can't do the gig. Do you want to fill in? Do you want to play?" And I was just like, "Did you call the right guy? Like, you know, you're calling like Chad from Miami for the Still Black, Still Proud, you know, band to fill in for Fred Wesley, right?" She's like, "Yeah, no, you know, Pee Wee loves you and it's gonna be cool." And I've been working with him for 8 years since. I mean, he's like an incredible figure in history. To really be a catalyst for an entire genre of music that is one of America's true art forms, and the stories about the band and what the music represented. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, James Brown was slated to play in Boston, and it was like a big, you know, The Day James Brown Saved Boston is a big documentary, and the whole, you know, so James Brown embodied like the beauty of blackness, because the sound and soul power and like that movement, they were sonically representative of the civil rights movement in many ways. And that impacted not only this country, but impacted Africa, which is why this Still Black, Still Proud tribute was so cool. But to hear these stories of the decisions that they made to play and to have it be on public access television so that people would stay in their houses and not go out and like start looting and rioting and tearing up the streets. And James's ability to talk to people and that iconic stature that he had, to say, you know, we're better than this, we're beautiful, we're going to rise above this, you know, to go out and be violent, and all of that would defy everything that Martin Luther King was working towards. to hear stories like that from those guys, and then to stand on stage next to Pee Wee and Maceo and have Pee Wee turn around with me as like a, man, I don't really know how to like handle this situation. We're playing Still Black and Still Proud, you know, on a global stage with like these African artists. Is it disrespectful for me to not sing or to sing or to, and Pee Wee turns around and he goes, man, you put your hand in the air. I'm like, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. You know, like, he's like, this isn't about, you know, the color of your skin. This is about what this represents. And it really kind of, it blew me away, and it gave me a tremendous perspective on what it means to be an ally in fighting for, you know, for against these injustices in our world that still persist to this day. And that kind of continues to inform my work and the belief that I have in the power of music to address some of these things. So it's, you know, I've had some really incredible musical experiences for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. Chad, how can people get in touch with Guitars Over Guns? How can they get involved? Where can they, you know, find you guys on social? All of the above.
Sure. So our website is guitarsoverguns.org. Please follow us on at Guitars Over Guns, Facebook and Instagram, and Twitter. And my personal page is CB Music on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook as well. You know, follow the work that we're doing. Be a voice. You know, be a champion for the work. It's, I think the thing that is really easy for us is to think that it's not going to matter. You know, the littlest things. And when we think about the tidal wave of impact that we want to have, you know, it's hard not to feel like a drop of water. But you know, every big wave is made up of, you know, millions of drops of water. It's going to take all of us. So definitely do your part, you know.
Yeah. Thanks for being on, Chad. It's
Absolutely.
been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're in Miami, visit us at Venture Cafe on Thursday nights. You can find details at venturecafemiami.org and connect with us on social at We Are Slam and Venture Cafe MIA.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams